So now it's my pleasure to introduce with you Dr. Shireen Sheikh, who is a UETN and Professor of Civil Engineering at University of Toronto. He has been involved with UTech from its inception to developing bylaws, working with a dedicated group of UETians to serve as a director on its board, and now he is our patron-in-chief. Dr. Sheikh has authored over 240 research papers in structural engineering. He is also co-authored and co-editor of several design codes and standards, material specifications, and books in his areas of specialization. His most recent work on the effects of climate change on structure. For his work, he has received awards and accolades from Canada, USA, Japan, China. He is a recipient of Sitara Imtiaz from Pakistan. His most recent award in 2023 is A.B. Sanderson Award from the Canadian Society for Civil Engineers for particularly outstanding contribution to the development and practice of structural engineering in Canada. And he has a passion for helping Pakistani students at home as well as in North America, at levels starting from primary education such as Dil schools in Pakistan to PhD and beyond. Working with a group of Pakistani Canadian professors such as Dr. Amir Asif of York University, who is in audience. He has been instrumental in getting Pakistani students, including in the Canadian government's MyTax Global Link internship programs, which provides funds for Pakistani undergrad students for research and training in Canada. So I welcome Dr. Shireen Sheikh to take the program from here.
Thank you, Irfan. When he sent me what he was going to say about me, I reduced it to less than half.
I think it's 1/3 actually.
He still managed to continue with this. You may have noticed that this particular group, UTech, has managed to take a turn towards being a university organization. For this particular activity, they wrote a proposal last year to the federal government. And the federal government gave them the money to start talking about the environment. And one of the issues there was that the Canadians can start teaching the youngsters in the school and in the university, but what are we going to do with the elders who have come from outside? They don't mind wasting water, they don't mind wasting electricity, and everything else that comes under their jurisdiction. So therefore, this program was particularly for seniors. And many of you may have felt that you perhaps don't belong in the group. We feel that one of these days you will become senior, and we're quite sure of that. When I graduated from a Canadian university, in this case University of Toronto, I was given a ring, which I'm still wearing, my original ring, and I was told, now you are engaged to engineering. And today you might be figuring out that on your table there is a sort of a chudi there, or a bangle, or a kada. And now we are told that we are now going to be engaged to saving the planet. So it basically says, I care for my planet. And I think this is something we should all take very seriously. And I don't like preaching to the converted, because if you are here, you already believe in it. I think it would be nice if we can take this message out and start convincing our colleagues, friends, children, and everybody else. So we have now two speakers. The first one belongs to the Canadian market, really. In this country, we have only one party which talks about the environment and does something about the environment. We have two other parties who talk about the environment and keep talking. So I was very glad that Mike Schreiner, who is an MPP from Guelph area, he agreed to speak to our group. And one of his close associates is also a UET graduate. And he happened to be my class fellow. It was quite easy for us to communicate with him and move on. Now, Mike Schreiner is also the leader of the Green Party in Ontario. And his constituents, which also includes my class fellow, think of him as a person who is a champion of climate change, income equality, transparent leadership, and also honest. So for a politician to have this last quality is something exceptional. So we are very thankful to Mike for having these qualities. So he has been a strong advocate of climate change, local food, and water initiatives. I think these are the two issues that are going to come back to haunt us if we are not careful. The next item on his agenda is affordable housing. You may have noticed that in this country we like to do one thing at a time. It's very difficult for us to walk and chew gum at the same time. The federal government is particularly very good at it. They decide to bring in 1 million people from outside and forgot to have housing for them, or even roads for them, or even hospitals for them. And when you talk to them, they tell you, but it is the provincial government, and the provincial government will tell you, but you never told us 1 million people were coming. So I think we are in that quandary as a Canadian. So people like Mike really have to have the push so that we can solve these obvious problems. I'm not going to take too much of your time so that I can ask him to tell us what he's up to. He's basically a business person, and his family is from farming, I believe. And he has 2 daughters, and his wife. They are all into spending time doing things that are environmentally friendly, and that is gardening, hiking, fishing, cycling, and staying active. This staying active is really something we must all think about. So Mike, it's all yours.
So thank you for that kind introduction, and it's a real honor to join all of you. And I would like to just give a special shout out to my good friend Tariq Chima from Guelph, who invited me to join you today. And I always say, and I'm not saying this because I'm in a room full of engineers, but I will always say that we need more engineers involved in politics and in public policy development. And I think especially now, when you think of the challenges we face due to the climate crisis, engineers are going to play a vital role in helping us solve those challenges. So I think it's appropriate that your theme today is how seniors can reduce their carbon footprints. I would say all of us need to figure out how to reduce our carbon footprints. And I don't think I have to tell any crowd with the connections to Pakistan that this crowd has just how vitally important it is that we reduce climate pollution, while at the same time making the investments to ensure that our communities, particularly our infrastructure, is climate ready. Because the reality is the climate crisis is here. Pakistan felt that more so than maybe any other country has to this point. And we have organizations like the World Health Organization saying the biggest threat to human health is the climate crisis. Right here in Ontario, I asked the Financial Accountability Officer to do what has turned out to be the world's first detailed analysis of the financial threats to the climate crisis, to public infrastructure. This decade alone, Ontario will face $26.2 billion in additional costs to make our infrastructure, and that's just public infrastructure, so public buildings, roads, transit, sewage, water lines, climate resilient. The FAO estimates that each and every year between now and the end of this century, we'll pay an extra $4.1 billion on average each and every year to adapt to the climate crisis. So the need to ensure that engineers help us design our infrastructure in ways that are going to withstand those kinds of climate impacts is critically important to our cost of living, to our health, to the vitality and vibrancy of our economy, to our quality of life. And so I want to talk about, and I was asked to maybe specialize a little bit in food and water, and I will do that. But I want to talk about some critically important ways of how we reduce climate pollution, and then how we can ensure that our infrastructure is ready for the climate crisis. And I want to begin, though, by saying that that was an impressive list of what came out of the workshops, of what we as individuals and families can do to help address climate. But the reason I got into politics was that while there are individual actions we can take, addressing the climate crisis is the biggest collective action challenge we've ever faced. Individual actions alone are not going to solve this crisis. And some of that you can see. I mean, if you live in a community that's car dependent, it's pretty hard to take transit. You know, if you live in a community where your electricity is, generated by coal-fired power plants, it's hard to take climate action. And that's why we need political action as well. And so that's why I think public policy development is so vitally important. And so I would say the first and most important thing that we can do to reduce climate pollution is to electrify everything in our society, and then ensure that that electricity is generated with emission-free sources. So in the context of Ontario, we're actually not bad. 5 years ago, 94% of our grid was generating clean electricity. Unfortunately, that's gone down to about 89% because the current government is ramping up gas plants, and they intend to ramp them up even more, which to me makes absolutely no sense, because we know that wind and solar now are the cheapest forms of electricity generation. And so that's why you're seeing, in this year alone, $1.8 trillion globally going into the green energy transition, with well over half of that being invested in wind and solar, because they are now the lowest cost sources of electricity generation. So having that low cost, clean power grid is critically important. And then what are we going to do with that electricity is we need to completely electrify our transportation systems. So our public transit needs to be electrified, as well as our personal vehicle use. And I say that knowing that many of us are facing affordability challenges right now. And so the good news is that I drove my electric car here from Guelph. That cost me 1/10 the cost of driving a gasoline-powered vehicle here. My maintenance costs are to put winter tires on my car in the winter and take them off in the spring. So we can save money by helping to electrify our transportation systems. And I would say the exact same thing on our buildings. And the reason I focus on those two is, in Ontario's context, transportation and buildings are our two highest sources of climate pollution. So those are the areas where we can reduce climate emissions the fastest. So how do we do it in our homes? Well, first of all, helping people save money by saving energy by retrofitting their homes to make them more energy efficient. On a per capita basis, those of us who live in Ontario, we use more energy per capita than almost anywhere else in the world. So we waste tons of energy. So we can just retrofit our buildings, businesses, and homes. We can help people save money by saving energy. And then, of course, we can then stop using fossil fuels to heat those homes and use things like electric heat pumps, which work much more efficiently than gas-generated or propane-fired furnaces. So that's going to help us save money, and it's going to help us reduce climate pollution. So those are probably the two most low-hanging fruit and easiest ways that we can reduce pollution. The third one, which is going to be harder, is just our industries. So we're starting to see industry like steel making, for example, which is high thermal, moving to electrified arc furnaces. I just met with the Cement Association here in Ontario. They're prepared to have carbon neutral cement fully implemented in this province by 2045. So the technological changes that are within our industry is starting to happen. So that's the good news. The challenging news is having the political will to actually put in the policy framework to make that happen. And so that's what people like myself, as elected members of Parliament, have to deliver on. But I think engineers in particular play a really important role in pushing politicians to follow the science, follow the evidence, and make science evidence-based decisions. So I want to close in my final few minutes here talking about a bit about food and water. And I want to connect it to the housing crisis, which is also connected to the climate crisis. So many of you know, here in Ontario, we're in a housing crisis. My 24-year-old daughter still lives in the basement. In cities like Guelph, it takes a minimum wage worker almost 80 hours to be able to afford rent on a basic one-bedroom apartment. Places like Toronto, there are no affordable apartments for minimum wage workers, for example. So how are we going to solve this crisis, and how is it affecting the climate crisis? So I would argue, those of you who follow politics in Ontario know the whole Greenbelt scandal has been a big scandal here. And what it comes down to is a choice. Are we going to continue to sprawl onto farmland and green space, or are we going to start building more communities with what I would call gentle density and missing middle housing? And so one of the ways we can build more homes that ordinary people can afford in the communities they know and love is to legalize things like multiplexes and 4-story apartments within existing neighborhoods. Legalizing 6 to 11-story, what would be called missing middle housing along major transportation and transit corridors. That's the fastest way we can build more homes that people can afford without paving over our farmland. And at the same time, it's going to help us reduce climate emissions, because transportation is the #1 source of climate pollution in Ontario, and the biggest driver of that is sprawl development, forcing people to commute until they qualify for a mortgage. And so again, I think addressing the housing affordability crisis, we can do that and address climate at the same time if we have smart land use planning. In Ontario, and it's connected to food, and here's why. In Ontario, I'm sorry about the Ontario focus, but that's my jurisdiction, we're losing 319 acres of farmland each and every day. To put that into perspective, that's the size of Toronto over the course of a year. We simply cannot feed a growing Ontario population, let alone a growing global population, if we continue to lose farmland at such an unsustainable rate. And so I think it's critically important that we bring in permanent protections for prime farmland in Ontario, because even though Ontario is a huge province, only 5% of our land is suitable for growing food, and less than 0.5%, 0.5%, is prime farmland. And so we simply have to protect that land in order to grow food for present and future generations. But I would also argue it's critically important to our economy, because the food and farming sector contributes $50 billion to Ontario's economy and employs over 880,000 people. That's more people than the entire manufacturing sector combined, and we know what a manufacturing powerhouse Ontario is. So it's also vital to our economy as well. And at the same time, when we're protecting that farmland, we're also going to, particularly here in the GTA, have to protect the forests, the moraines, and the wetlands that are so vital to cleaning our drinking water and protecting us from severe weather events like flooding. In Southern Ontario, we've paved over 75% of our wetlands. And so one of the reasons the Greenbelt battle was so important was not only we want an honest government that's not going to engage in corrupt deals that help 3 or 4 people cash in $8.3 billion, but it was also vital to protect the farmlands, the wetlands, the moraines that are so critical to cleaning our drinking water, protecting us from flooding. And so that's why I think responsible, proper land use planning, determining how and where we design the growth of our communities and our housing is so critically important to maintaining our ability to grow food, our ability to have clean drinking water, and our ability to ensure that we don't have severe flooding in this province. And it's so much cheaper, and I would guess most engineers would agree with this, it's so much cheaper to have nature protect us in the first place as much as possible than actually try to do it through building infrastructure to help protect us from the damage that we've done. And so I'm going to continue hopefully working with all of you on pushing the provincial government to make the investments we need in reducing climate pollution, to protecting nature, and delivering nature-based solutions by protecting our farmlands, wetlands, forests, and green space, and ensuring that we do make investments in our infrastructure to ensure that they're climate ready for the climate crisis that's already baked in to what we're experiencing in society today. And I believe engineers are going to play and continue to play a critical role in delivering that to Ontario. And it's why I hope all of you reach out to me in my office to give me your good advice and recommendations and insights. But it's why I hope each and every one of you, regardless of your party affiliations, engage in politics and the public process, because we need your input and insights in ensuring high quality public policy to address the climate crisis. So thank you for inviting me to be with you today.